Hi, my name is Bartek. I am one of product managers working at Coder. And today I want to share with you a demo of our new integration with the dev container standard that we are adding to Coder version 2.24 in July 2025. Before I show you how it works and what you can do with this new integration, I want to give a quick outline about the dev container standard. So what are dev containers in the first place? It's a mechanism that allows the developers working on a specific project to define a perfect environment in which the project is expected to work and consequently reduce any incompatibility problems for anyone else who is working on this project, any other contributors. The definition of this environment is done through a definition of a Docker container, actually a development containers. That's why the name is dev container. And it's done through a dev container JSON file, which is hosted alongside the repository of the project. So this is kind of very high level definition of what it is. Many of our developers are using dev containers. It's a standard that is growing in popularity. And at Coder, we have a system that allows to some degree usage of dev container standard. We are doing this through a mechanism called env builder, which is not necessarily working with the standard properly. So it actually rebuilds the whole workspace, the whole environment based on the definition of the dev container, rather than starting the dev container within the workspace. So in version 2.24, we are changing this. We are adding an alternative mechanism, hopefully more compatible and easier to use. And this mechanism I'm going to show you in a moment. So with that said, let me start sharing my screen, and I'm going to show you, how it works and how to configure this. So what you can see right now is my Firefox browser and Coder UI. We will start by looking at the definition of the dev container integration. So for that, I will pull up this fragment of our documentation. In order for this new integration to work within the workspace, you have to assure that two things happen. First of all, that actually, let me scroll a little bit further. First of all, that this automation of the dev container detection and injection and usage is added as a resource. So this is a part of a Terraform file that you need to make sure exists within the workspace. It adds dev container resource from Coder, and this is where the whole magic happens. The second thing that is a prerequisite for everything to work is that within the workspace, you need to have a dev container command line interface, dev container CLI. And again, we are making it available as a module, although you can also deploy it manually or through a post-startup script if you prefer to do it that way. With a module in Terraform, it's just much easier to do it. I'm showing currently the documentation, which is still pre-release. It's an early access, so it's not exactly compatible with the version that you will see in GA. So please bear in mind, I'm going to show you one more element of this documentation that is going to be slightly changed, actually is slightly changed in the release version. So you see that in this in a pre-release version of dev container support, we also were requiring an environment variable to be defined for Coder agent dev container enable equal true. So that was another mechanism to enable the whole integration and automation. It's not required in the GA version. In fact, we are switching, you might say, the logic of this mechanism. And from within the environment, the developers will be able to override the setting and disable the dev container automation by setting the environment variable of such a name to false or to 0, in which case the dev container mechanism, the detection and injection of coder agents is not going to happen. So that's as much as you can, as you have to do in order for this new integration to work. Other than that, everything should just happen and should be really, really easy to do. And now let me show you the actual example. So I'm gonna find a template which, is a nice showcase of this functionality. I'm going to make the fonts a little bit larger so that you can see. And actually, now the edit button is missing, so let's make it that way. So I'm going to show you the Terraform file and bring again those elements of the integration that I mentioned, those two elements, the repository and the module. The resource and the module. So this is relatively non-complex Terraform file, and it does indeed include those two elements. So you can see there is a module for the dev container command line interface, this auxiliary tool that is required for the integration to work properly. And if I scroll a little bit further down, see there's a resource for the coder agent that adds the whole insights and visibility and connectivity. And a little bit further down, you can see also the resource for coder dev container. So this is the actual magical part, the whole integration and detection of the dev containers running within the environment. So that's as much as the definition of the Terraform really requires right now. So let's create a workspace using this very template. I'm going to call it something like this so that it's easy to find later on. This particular template requires just one parameter, and this is a link to a GitHub URL that happens to have a dev container JSON file. So this file that I mentioned contains the definition of the dev container environment. So I'm going to paste a link to such a simple project. It's just a starter, and let's create a workspace. So now you need to pay attention to what is going to happen on the screen. Once the workspace is created, you see the regular two buttons to the parent workspace. They have already disappeared, but they were there for a fraction or for a few seconds. So this is how it would normally look like if you have a regular non-dev container environment. Just the application buttons that allow you to connect to your workspace. However, in this case, we have a dev container, and as you can see, it was detected. It is now being started, and once it's started, it's going to have the coder agent injected into it. And once that happens, I will be able to connect directly to this dev container within the parent workspace. So you can kind of see this matryoshka type of construction here. You have a parent workspace in which the dev containers are run as containers, and you can connect either to the parent workspace. However, most likely, if you have a dev container definition and you have enabled the integration, you want to connect directly to the dev container within. So that's why the buttons that link to the parent workspace are now not exposed directly. They are still available here should you want to connect to the parent workspace with a terminal or in this case VS Code desktop. And with, I hope, just a few more seconds, we will see that the agent has connected, and we will see those two buttons actually show up and have the names that will allow me to connect to them. It takes a while to download the necessary images in this case, but as you can see, this has worked, and now I can connect to the dev container. And I want to underline this one more time. It's a separate environment in this case to the parent workspace. One lives within the other, of course, but they live separately. They have their own connection, their own applications. You can connect to either of them through SSH. And you can do this either from UI or from the command line interface using Coder command line tool. So now you can see I have both. What is interesting with our current integration is that you might have multiple of such dev containers running at the same time. It's probably not a very common scenario, but right now it is supported. And if that is the case, you will see a number of such dev container blocks and sections listed here, and you will be able to connect to each of them individually should you choose to switch between those two. It's going to be super easy, and they will, as containers in general, they will retain their relative independence from each other. So now, with that said, I want to show you one more interesting thing, a dynamic element of the new dev container integration, which is the fact that, this definition held in dev container JSON file, it is part of the source code. It's part of the repository of the project. And it also undergoes certain changes and edits. So it is possible that during the project development, the dev container will also be changed. And what we have done here is a detection of such a situation, that the file for the dev container definition has changed. And consequently, as a developer working on such a project, you might want your environment to be refreshed as well. So you will be notified about this in the UI, and you will be able to rebuild and reconnect to such a dev container. So let me now simulate this event where something happens to a dev container JSON file. I'm going to use terminal to connect to the parent host. And as you can see, within this parent host, I have a .dev container folder. And within that folder, I'm going to have the dev container JSON file. This is the file that actually defines the environment for the project. So now if I pretend I'm editing this file, you will see in a second that we will detect that this file has been changed or modified in a way. And there you go. This is a label that is added here, and it actually says something has happened to your dev container file. It's probably changed. I didn't actually perform any actual change, but we detected that the file was edited. And consequently, you might want to rebuild your environment. And I will click this link here. I can also do this by clicking this button at any point in time, even if nothing has changed. But I am now encouraged to do this to make sure that my environment is up to date and up to the definition. And again, the container behind the scene was actually recreated and reconnected to with Coder agent injected into it so that we could create the proper connectivity, proper tunnels, and also detect all the applications that are within. So that's the basics of using the dev containers and the new integration. I mentioned earlier that we have this original env builder based mechanism. It's going to stay for a period of time at least. We are still going to keep it as an option for those customers and those users who do not wish to run containers within their environments. This is a technical prerequisite for all of this to work. This is a legit container running within the workspace. So if you have your workspace running as a container, let's say in the Kubernetes environment, this means that the containers are running within the containers right now. So this may be prohibitive requirement for some of the users. So the env builder stays. It's a mechanism that will, for at least a period of time, be available alongside this new integration. We are now observing the adoption of this, and we are collecting all the possible comments that the users might have. And hopefully, this new standard is going to be accepted and embraced by everyone so that we will just have one option to choose from. If you were interested in how the choice between these two is made, what is the best practice of using env builder versus what is the best practice of using this new integration, our documentation is being actually updated as I'm talking, as I'm recording right now, to have a comparison between those two mechanisms. So it will be relatively simple to make an educated choice in this case. And of course, all the users, all the customers who have the Env Builder configured already, they don't have to change anything unless they choose to switch over to this new integration for any reason. One more thing that I want to show you is in the documentation. I'm not going to demo this, but there is a coder command line equivalent of all the operations that I have just performed. So by adding this modifier ---- container with the container name, you can access the specific container through SSH. You can also integrate it into the IDE if you don't want to use, of course, the UI-based approach and just use the coder command line tool for this. There is also, of course, a mechanism to forward the ports between the dev containers and the environments. So that's it for this quick demo. I hope it's relatively self-explanatory. I hope it's going to be easy for you to use. And if you have any comments or questions or feedback, I am all ears. Please send them along, and I'll do my best to answer in a timely fashion. Thank you.